So last week we looked at Leviticus chapter 1 and we discussed the whole burnt offering, the olah. I tried to clean it up a little bit, except for my bottom line, a little wonky, but and we talked about how this is a sacrifice that's for everyone. And while the priests were there to help make that sacrifice happen, we participated in it. This was something the whole community participated in. And the reality is that it's not something that happened very often. This is for the big things, the big questions, and only as needed. The other side of it is that you could do any type of sacrifice, bull, ram, the goat, the dove, the pigeon, that it was based on what you could afford. But yet God brought his revelation to the whole, no matter what you could afford. You didn't get more of God because God's revelation because you brought the bull, nor did you get less because you brought the pigeon. And then we talked at the very end about how the modern equivalent, we, like the season of Lent we're in, that this is the notion of fasting. And we talked a little bit about fasting, how that's realistically the practice of fasting was you not just give up something, but you make the meal and you give the meal away while you do not eat the meal. And so, again, this is that notion of we're looking to God for the big things. We started talking about this as almost like the menu. Terry, I wish you had been here because, in Exodus, we talked about how the tabernacle was, you kept wanting to call it the RV, and I called it the food truck. That these offerings are kind of like the menu. These are the items God wants us to participate in as we come and receive. So that's, again, kind of setting the stage. And so tonight we're going to look at Leviticus chapter 2, and we're going to look at the second offering. But before we do, is there any questions about chapter 1 or any other thoughts you had after we finished?
So as long as you had bulls, let's say you had a ram too, you had to use your most expensive.
It was expected that if you were a cattle rancher and you had multiple, that you're going to bring the bull. While you might have an oxen to like plow the field, but if you were a shepherd with sheep, and that you weren't expected to bring your only oxen. If you get what I'm saying?
If you were a shepherd and you brought a pigeon, they'd think a little weird. Okay.
Right. So it was a little bit on societal status there, but it's primarily meant to be what is it that you make your livelihood on? Because again, that whole burnt offering, you're giving up. So if you're giving up, and we talked about that these are males. I guess I should have wrote that. These are male animals because you're giving up their reproductive ability as well. And I liked what you said, Mindy, about the females. God wasn't asking you to take away that which cares for the young. We're taking away
The producer.
the producer. So, but you give you can give the best of what you can afford. But God doesn't require you to give more than what is reasonable. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts or questions? All right, then Leviticus chapter 2. My first paragraph is verses 1 through 3. When anyone brings a grain offering as an offering to the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour. He shall pour oil on it and put frankincense on it and bring it to Aaron's sons, the priest. And he shall take from it a handful of the fine flour and oil with all of its frankincense. And the priest shall burn this as its memorial portion on the altar, a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. But the rest of the grain offering shall be for Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the Lord's food offering. So, any questions or thoughts with this one?
Mine says olive oil.
So bare minimum, we know that this is fine flour, right? Olive oil. And let's see if I can spell frankincense.
So I'm assuming they had to supply the frankincense also.
Okay, I can't spell it.
Just put frank.
Yeah.
Not like Frankenstein.
No, this is the same.
So we mentioned this, right? What else do we learn from this? Anything else we can fill in our chart? In this first paragraph, we haven't really been given a name for it yet.
Well, a little bit of it sounds like it's gifts for Aaron and his sons.
So this is a grain offering. Or food offering. And you said, this one is for Aaron, for the priests. We'll just put it that way. That's right. That the people don't eat this one. The part that isn't burned up goes to the priests. Have we heard anything about reason or frequency yet? And we.
Using odor, that's all.
Okay, so let's.
Yeah, I wonder what frankincense smells like when it burns.
Were you here the day that I burnt frankincense? You missed that one. It's a pretty pungent odor, but it's not a bad odor. It's just
Something you can stand.
Oh yeah, but it's extremely recognizable.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a Catholic church and been close enough when they have their?
The tincture and their.
Yeah.
They usually chase me out when that happens.
What? Yeah, they typically are burning frankincense when they do.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
And again, it's meant to hearken back to the tabernacle and the temple with the prayers of the people. So if frankincense is meant to be the prayers of the people, you think that plays anything into this?
I like smell already.
I hope you're not allergic.
Smells like tobacco to me.
I wouldn't say it was.
It's
Yeah.
somewhat in, I guess.
Except my grandfather used to smoke.
If you're in a Catholic church and I have, our nieces and nephews, and if you're close enough, you can smell it. I mean, some Catholic churches are really big, but I mean, depending on how they're, and some will walk it up the aisle.
Yeah.
It depends on what they walking up the aisle.
Yeah.
I've only seen use it like a
Yeah, not
funeral when they.
Most Catholic churches don't do it every week, and they don't do it for most masses.
And we've done it for, first communions.
First communions, funerals, a wedding, yeah, the bigger events.
Yeah, funerals, I don't know if I've seen it, well, at least around here.
Yeah,
Some of their ceremonial things.
Oh, yeah.
it's pretty, and that little bit that she just lit will probably fill this room. Keep reading while that's burning. Yeah. All right, next paragraph. 4 through 10. When you bring a grain offering baked in the oven as an offering, it shall be unleavened loaves of fine flour with oil, or unleavened wafers smeared with oil. And if your offering is a grain offering baked on a griddle, it shall be of fine flour unleavened mixed with oil. You shall break it in pieces and pour oil on it. It is a grain offering. And if your offering is a grain offering cooked in a pan, it shall be made with fine flour with oil. And you shall bring the grain offering that is made of these things to the Lord. And when it is presented to the priest, he shall bring it to the altar. And the priest shall take from the grain offering its memorial portion and burn this on the altar, a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. But the rest of the grain offering shall be for Aaron and his sons. It is a most holy part of the Lord's food offering. So now we have that it could be cake or
Wafer.
cake, whatever, unleavened bread. Okay,
What is memorial portion?
so with the whole burnt offering, everything is put on the altar to burn, and therefore given up to God. With this one, only a small portion is put on the altar to be burnt up to God as a memorial, a remembrance that all of it is technically given to God, but only a part of it is burnt up. Does that make sense? So some of this is, we know that this is some kind of a memorial, right? Have we gotten any other information yet? Nothing yet? Keep going. Next paragraph, 11 through 13. No grain offering that you bring to the Lord shall be made with leaven, for you shall burn no leaven nor any honey as a food offering to the Lord. As an offering of first fruits, you may bring them to the Lord, but they shall not be offered on the altar for a pleasing aroma. You shall season all of your grain offerings with salt. You shall not let the salt of the covenant with your God be missed from your grain offerings. With all your offerings you shall offer salt. So there's also salt in here. Okay.
Do they have salt mines and stuff like that, or they just dehydrate water?
Probably a little bit of both. And man, I can smell the frankincense now. If you can't smell it yet, it hasn't got that far yet.
So I was gonna ask about the honey. In my Bible, it says it was forbidden on the altar, perhaps because of its use in the Canaanite cultic practice.
So, honey becomes a symbol for God's provision from the wild. You know, there's no, I mean, we have learned to cultivate honey with honeybees, and I know Dawn used to have a hive. I don't know if you've got a swarm this year or not when they start swarming, but you know, we actually will collect beehives and harvest honey. But most of the time, honey was just found in the wild. And a lot of times you'd find it in logs or in dead animals. Bees would weasel their way into the carcass of a dead animal. And so honey was not seen as a bad thing, but it was often an unclean thing. By the same token, from a pure logistics standpoint, honey is just raw sugar. And if you put sugar on a fire, it burns, but it leaves a residue that you can't hardly get rid of. It's just like it's sticky when you eat it, it sticks to the grill and everything else. And so I think that there's, on the one hand, there's a pragmatic side of don't put honey on the grill because we don't want to have to replace the thing because we can't get all the honey residue off. But the other side of it is honey at this point in time was kind of like the wild game. It was something that was found. It was almost like by chance. And so it's not something that's yours. It's a bonus thing. It's not something that, it's really not a sacrifice. Does that make sense?
And I wondered if it had to do with the sugar part of it.
I think pragmatically there's a sugar part, but then there's the whole, it doesn't cost you anything to give honey line. Honey isn't yours.
That's my flip question. Salt is mentioned several times, and in mine, again, this teaching Bible talks about that salt was costly.
Salt was absolutely extremely costly. In fact, for most of human history, salt, when you didn't have gold or silver, people traded in salt. Because salt cured meat. It allowed you to preserve things when they weren't normally able to be preserved. And so I used to joke on our Monday, Thursday meals that we wouldn't put salt on the table. When the first person who asked for salt, I'd say, well, this little salt shaker is probably about a year's wages in Jesus's time. It was expensive for real good quality salt. And so while the honey doesn't cost you anything, the salt is actually a sacrifice. Does that make sense? And Jim asked me a question before Bible study about the leaven, why you shouldn't make one with any yeast or leaven in there. And the reality is, as I was telling him, yeast represents two things in Scripture. It represents your influence, because a little bit of influence goes a long way, right? But it also, on the converse side, it represents a level of deception. And do you get what I mean by that? The reality is if you have a wafer or unleavened bread or a cake, the cake is going to look fuller than the wafer or the unleavened bread, right? And of course, we like white bread, which is really full. Yet those four dishes all might have the same amount of flour in them. And so it looks like if you're giving a baked good with yeast in it, it looks like you're giving a bigger offering than you actually are. You get what I'm saying? And so that's why
You're saying size matters. Yeah, because it's
In-
unleavened, is the thin, like, I
Right.
like that now, is that what you call
Yeah.
it?
well, and hand bread has its own leaven.
Oh, it does.
Where you guys were here for Monday, Thursday, right? The unleavened bread that we had, it's kind of dense, but it's still really good. Of course, we make it.
Or top it up, you know,
Yes.
or this.
Yes.
People do that.
So that's the thing. God doesn't want us to pretend that we're giving him more than what we actually are, to make everybody else believe that we're giving more than we actually are. Does that make sense?
Sorry, I've been told that we're dyslexic on the cameras again.
Oh,
I don't know what happened, but
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but one of the cameras is backwards. So.
Yeah. It's back.
Oh, I
It's
see it, it's, yeah.
Well, see, but it shows backwards here and here, but usually it doesn't show backwards out.
Well, you had it when you had it on there, it was.
Yeah, some of them are backwards, some of them aren't. I don't get which.
Are you guys familiar with the story in the book of Acts where Ananias and Sapphira, this couple, sell a field? And everybody else is selling their property, their fields, and they're giving the money to the church, the young followers of Christ, to help the needy and be there for each other. Well, Ananias and Sapphira, they want to be a part of the group. There's that kind of a peer pressure thing going on where they feel like, well, we've got this, we could sell it, but they keep some of the proceeds back. They bring it like they're doing like everybody else is, where they're giving the whole thing over, but they're really not. And so when Peter calls them out for it, they try to lie. They say, oh, no, this is everything. And in that story, God strikes them both dead because they're lying about what they're offering. This right here this offering is called a minha, or a tribute offering.
It's backwards up there, but Dawn says it's okay online.
So this is an acknowledgement that everything we have comes from God. Because this is always going to be some kind of a grain, or, I mean, even fruit, or the fruit that produces olive oil, the salt, the frankincense, all of these things are things that come from nature. We don't do anything other than plant or harvest this stuff. You get what I'm saying? There's a sense in which with the animals, we tend to them and we make sure that they reproduce to produce the offspring. But for all of these things, God, we may throw the seed out there, but God's the one who causes the seed to germinate. God's the one who causes the seed to grow. God's the one who causes the seed to produce, right? With the olives, we may plant that olive tree, but God's the one who makes the olive tree to grow. God's the one who makes the olives come on the tree. God's the one who allows the olives to ripen. We just harvest them and smash them to make the olive oil. So, in essence, this is a tribute saying we acknowledge that everything we have is yours, God. And so we're bringing a portion back to you to say thank you. Does that make sense? Do you guys know the parable of the wicked tenants in the Gospel of Matthew? Where it says that the owner of this vineyard, he planted the vineyard, he set up the well and the watchtower, and he lent it out to some tenants, and he went off to do business and become king in a foreign land. And he sent back his servant to come and gather the minha, the tribute offering. And they're like, we're not giving that to him. He's not our king. And they beat the one servant and they kill another servant. And then finally he sends his son, right? And they said, well, surely he will respect the son. And they say, no, if we kill the son, then all of it's ours. They're talking about this tribute offering. This reality that we are supposed to live a life where we acknowledge everything belongs to God. And yet, this is also where the offering of first fruits, this is the notion of a tithe, okay? The first tenth. And the reality is that just a small portion, like if you give a 5-pound bag of flour, only a small portion, a cupful, a handful, was what was actually burnt up and given to God. Now, the rest of it was meant for, it says the priests, but really it's for anyone in service to God. So, if you remember the story of David when he's running from Saul and he's trying to do what's right, he goes to the tabernacle and he eats the showbread that's on the altar. And of course, normally they'd say you're not allowed to do that, but yet he is the anointed king of God. He's doing the work of God, and so therefore he's allowed to eat that. Jesus, during his life, would have been able to eat this offering because he is doing the work of God. Does that make sense? Anything else we noticed so far? We'll keep going then. 14 through 16. If you offer a grain offering of first fruits to the Lord, you shall offer for the grain offering of your first fruits fresh ears, roasted with fire, crushed new grain. And you shall put oil on it and lay frankincense on it. It is a grain offering. And the priest shall burn as a memorial portion some of the crushed grain and some of the olive oil with all of its frankincense. It is a food offering to the Lord. So it's a first fruits offering. Or tithe. This is where the notion of tithe comes from.
So is that the modern equivalent?
So I would say this is genuinely our offerings. What we give to God willingly. It's not what we feel like is demanded of us. It's the thanksgiving, the tribute to God, saying, you cared for me, you've provided for me, you've given me the ability to do what I do. Here, I give you my first fruits. So this is a memorial, but it's also a thank you. Does that make sense?
And I assume this is something that is readily available to everybody.
Everyone's going to eat bread. I mean, everyone eats bread at this point in time. In fact, most of the food they ate was bread. It was the most common thing that they could have. And so in theory, everyone would have some. And realistically, we're going to see, and what I put under the other info, this offering is often offered alongside the other offerings. So even if you do a whole burnt offering, you would probably bring a minhaj, a tribute offering, a thanks offering alongside it. So while the whole animal might be burnt up, the thank you offering alongside it almost preemptively would say, okay, God, we're thanking you in advance, knowing that you're going to answer and give us the revelation we're looking for.
So you bring a main dish and bring a dessert while you're coming.
Main dish, bread. I mean, we have some kind of a start with every meal, don't we? It's been pretty hard for me to eliminate starches. Peas, beans, potatoes, corn, rice, wheat, oats. What?
It all sounds good.
It all sounds good. So
They must have ate high carb diets back then. Must have ate high carb diets back then.
I love potatoes.
Yeah, me too.
they didn't. By standards of today, they probably ate less carbs than what we do, but they just ate less overall than we do. So like they would have bread with every meal, but they didn't have potatoes, they didn't have corn, they didn't have rice, they didn't have peas, they didn't have beans. They would eat nuts, they would eat fruit. It was only on rare occasions that they would eat meat, because to eat meat meant you were sacrificing an animal that could give you so many other things. Oftentimes they would eat cheese, but they wouldn't eat meat and cheese in the same meal. Does that make sense? Anything else you noticed so far in chapter 2? Because we've essentially finished this one. There's probably, it feels cheap to just call this one as a modern equivalent an offering, because, and just like it kind of felt cheap to call the whole burnt offering prayer and fasting. But this is probably the best way that I know of that we participate in this. What are the things that you do to say thank you to God for everything He's done for you? So this might also include service. That makes sense? Anything else you notice from chapter 2? There is a notion with this, that we bring this offering that God has provided to us with the notion we're seeking that God would continue to let us use his resources. Does that make sense? Today, most of us aren't farmers. We don't grow our own crops. We don't raise our own animals. We go and we do some other task, and then we go to the supermarket or the farmer's market, and we buy things that we need. And so there's a sense in which when we put money in the offering plate and we do acts of service, we're saying, God, we're giving back to you because you continue to give us the strength, you continue to give us the health, you continue to give us the wisdom and the knowledge to do the things that we do that allow us to provide for our families. Does that make sense? And that's why as Christians, I don't really like the notion of a tithe, because often as Christians, we say we want to give up to the tithe, as if the tithe is the pinnacle of what you give. Does that make sense? When the reality is, for the people of Israel, the tithe is where you started, and then you gave above and beyond that to say thank you. Does that make sense? And in the New Testament, there's almost a sense of realizing, just like the Minhas, everything we have is God's. Everything that we have has been given to us by God. He's either blessed us with a family that's been able to bless us. He's blessed us with wisdom and knowledge to be able to have a better paying job. He's blessed us with the skills necessary to have that better paying job. He's allowed us to find the places we want to live and to live the life that we want to live. And so realistically, everything we have has been given to us by God. And so it should all be used for his glory. Does that make sense? Any other thoughts on chapter 2?
Well, and where it says to give the rest to be given to Aaron and his sons, that's kind of like their pay. I mean,
Yes, absolutely. So Aaron and his sons are not allowed to go out and farm the fields. Especially while they're wandering in the wilderness, they will never have land. And they are so busy in the temple that they really don't even have time to go and care for their own flocks. So while the other Levites, like the ones who carrying around the tabernacle and caring for it, they may have some free time. And so later on, as we've been reading, for those of you reading the Bible in a year, we've been reading, about the distribution of the land. And today's readings, we read about the cities that were given to the Levites and the priests. They were given places to dwell, but they still had this work to do. And so while they were allowed to have flocks and herds, because they had to give their own sacrifices, they weren't going to have huge flocks and herds like the shepherds were. You get what I'm saying? And so their flocks and herds would be, we might call it just the backyard chicken coop kind of thing. But they're supposed to be spending their time, rather than tending to the animals out in the field, rather than tending to the field, rather than tending to the olive groves and the grapevines, they're at the temple caring for everybody else who's coming. That's why a portion of, at least for certain, the Minha and the others, are given to Aaron and his descendants. It's only the whole burnt offering that Aaron or the Levites or the priests don't get any of. Does that make sense? An answer? Anything else? Want to jump into chapter 3? 3. First paragraph is 1 through 5. If his offering is a sacrifice of peace offering, if he offers an animal from the herd, male or female, he shall offer it without blemish before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and kill it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall throw the blood against the side of the altar. And from the sacrifice of the peace offering, as a food offering to the Lord, he shall offer the fat entrails, all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them at the loins, and the long lobe of the liver that he shall remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons shall burn it on the altar on top of the burnt offering, which is on the wood on the fire. It is a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. So we already know this was called a peace offering. What else did we learn about this one?
Can be male or female.
Yep. Male or female.
I'm trying to remember, was the Ola slaughtered out somewhere else and brought in, or was it there? Because this one, it's right at the door. so-
Yes. So let's go back. The Ola was killed at the north side of the altar, wasn't it?
That's right, that-
Yeah.
Whereas this one is killed outside of the tabernacle.
Wasn't the dove and the pigeon done on the south?
Well, yes, but this one is done at the altar, and this one is done at the gate.
Okay.
At altar. Oh, how can I not spell tonight? And this one is at the gate. Okay. What else do you notice? Anything? So this one's going to be, I mean, it's an animal, so of course it's a blood sacrifice.
Part of this offering still goes to the Lord?
Part of it goes to the Lord. Needed another category here.
Well, I guess how do you define, is it a peace offering to the Lord, or is it a peace offering if you and I were fighting?
Let's keep going. Let's read the next paragraph.
I mean, because that'll make,
That makes a difference,
Hold
right?
on, I'm gonna, before you go on.
Okay.
So the first one, and I'm looking back, you had to wash the inner parts.
Yes,
Okay, I was trying to remember if you did something with the facts. I remember we
Yes.
talked about that. And this one mentions that as well.
so the fat, the kidneys, and the long lobe of the liver are all burnt to God. That's God's portion.
okay,
Now, if you remember, we talked about the kidneys and the liver. The cultures around them use those organs in particular for divination to try and get God's will, or the will of the gods. By the same token, the fat, there was this notion that if you ate the fat of an animal, you kind of took its strength in yourself. I know it's weird. It's not the way we think about things, but. And so the portion God is asking for in this is, well, first of all, I don't ever think I want to eat a kidney.
That's a filter.
It's a filter, and the liver is the same. I know we had this conversation. I left the sign up for you for liver and onions. But there's a sense in which God is saying, I'm going to take the parts that are least usable. Does that make sense? Which is funny, don't you think? Whereas foreign gods, they would want the best of the animal. God's saying, I'm going to take the things that you probably wouldn't want anyway. And I don't want you to eat them because, again, you said they're filters. And you remember the promises of God. If you live the kosher life, he said, You wouldn't have disease, your women wouldn't have miscarriages, and your stuff wouldn't wear out while you're in the desert. So if you don't eat the filters, you're less likely to get the diseases that they had. So there's a pragmatic piece of that. But yes, your point about, is this trying to make peace with God, or is this making peace with others? That's a question that hasn't been answered yet. So next paragraph, 6 through 11. If his offering or a sacrifice of peace offering to the Lord is an animal from the flock, male or female, he shall offer it without blemish. If he offers a lamb for his offering, then he shall offer it before the Lord, lay his hand on the head of the offering, and kill it in front of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's son shall throw the blood against the sides of the altar. Then from the sacrifice of the peace offering, he shall offer as a food offering to the Lord its fat. He shall remove the whole fat tail, cut off those to the backbone, and the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on its entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them at the loins, and the long lobe of the liver he shall remove with the kidneys. And the priest shall burn it on the offering as a food offering to the Lord. So again, we're definitely saying this is this could be a sheep, right? And it could be a goat, because that's what the flocks are, right? Anything else you notice that's new? Not really anything, not much new in this paragraph yet, is there? All right, we'll finish the chapter 12 through 17. If his offering is a goat, then he shall offer it before the Lord, and lay his hand on its head, and kill it in front of the tent of meeting. And the sons of Aaron shall throw its blood against the sides of the altar. Then he shall offer it as his offering for a food offering to the Lord, the fat coverings of the entrails and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them at the loins, and the long lobe of the liver that he shall remove with the kidneys. And the priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering with a pleasing aroma. All fat is the Lord's. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. In all your dwelling places you shall eat neither fat nor blood.
Why does it seem like he's got to give instructions for each animal when they're almost the same? I mean, at least the calf, the cow, the sheep, the goat.
I've never butchered a goat, but now I've butchered a lot of sheep over the last 20 years. I think we're up to like 8 or 9 now. There's a lot of fat on a sheep.
Oh, yeah.
A lot more than what you'd think. My assumption is the goat doesn't have nearly as much fat. By the same token, a cow has quite a bit of fat on it, but notice when the only time we've had a cow mentioned is the whole burnt, so everything's being burnt anyway. But in this instance, God is very clearly saying fat and blood are his portion. Now, blood we know it represents life, right? And blood also is what carries diseases, going back to your thing about the filters. What do you think fat would represent? Anyway, we use it as part of an idiom, the fat of the land. What's that?
Excess.
The excess. It's the overflow. It's the abundance. We take what we need, we give the abundance away. Does that make sense?
My initial thought was maybe it burned longer.
Well, it does help with burning the wood and things like that. I mean, there's a pragmatic, it definitely help keep the fire going. But I think that it's meant to be a symbol for the fact that the life of this animal is God's, and the abundance of this animal is God's. And so all of the fat was given. And of course, I don't like this, but the doctor told me I need to stop eating the fat on the steak because, you know, even though it's where the flavor comes from in the steak, it's also where most of the calories are in the steak. And it contributes to this, right? And God wants us to be healthy. And so that excess, that fat is his.
So is God telling us to give our abundance to others?
Absolutely. If you have been blessed abundantly, then give abundantly. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't set things aside for a rainy day. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't save for your retirement and things like that. But if you have more than you need, then that extra is a blessing that we are meant to use to bless others. There's a well-known fact about John Wesley. He was paid very little when he first got started, you know, because there wasn't very many Methodists, there weren't a lot of people, there weren't a lot of churches. And the reality is, as years went by and the movement grew, and there were more and more churches, and he was, you know, given larger offerings. He lived on the same amount every year. And anything above that he got, he gave away. He's like, I don't need more than this to live. God's providing me everything I need. And he was pouring his life out as an offering. So anything above and beyond that, he used to help the poor and the sick and the needy. And, you know, he was just seen as an extremely generous man. And, you know, there's a reality where I wonder if we lived by that same principle. That when you get the raise, when you get the bonus check, is that something you use for yourself to make you happy? Or do you see that as a bonus, like a blessing, and what good can we do with it? Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't use some of it for yourself. Absolutely. But there's a sense in which, do we understand that every time we receive a blessing, it's so that we can be a blessing? Does that make sense? So pragmatically, I want to talk about this because you started to, I'm going to have to take my notes. The name for this one is Shelamim. Shelamim. And here's the thing, that is a plural word. It is always meant to be more than one person participating. So this could be anyone, but the reasons for it is it's called a peace or a well-bringing offering, a well-being offering. It could be seeking peace in the body or healing. It could be peace in relationships. It could be peace for your crops, or even peace for your business. So you might offer this offering as a well-being, saying, Lord, would you make my business thrive? You know, I want to make sure I'm doing good business. I want to make sure I'm honoring you. And so I offer this peace offering saying, Lord, help me to do better. It might be that it's a relationship offering. It may be that you and I have been warring together and we need to make peace. And so we both bring an offering and we both give this shelamim to the priests. Now, the reality is that anyone can participate in this. And notice, while if we go back to the descriptions in Exodus, it says that the right thigh was given to Aaron and his sons, right? But the rest of the animal is partaken of by everyone who's present. So anyone can do it and everyone eats. So if you and I have been warring, I'm just using that as an example, and we both bring our sacrifice, all the rest of the people who are here gets to eat of it too. Because the peace doesn't just affect us, the peace affects everybody around us. Does that make sense?
Maybe we should do that, just.
I keep saying, I'd love to have a barbecue every Sunday after church, but and the reality is this was also meant to be a dual offering, that especially for with healing or with the crops and the business in particular, you'd give an offering, a Shalomim offering at the beginning, and then once you receive the healing, you'd come back and give an offering, thanks offering, the same offering again. At the beginning of the planting season, you'd give this offering saying, Lord, bless the harvest. At the end of the planting season, in the first fruit season, you'd bring this as a peace offering saying, Lord, thank you for blessing us. When you start the business, you say, God, would you bless this business? And every year you give this offering again to say, thank you for blessing my business. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to wrap my head around all of these offerings and this never-ending food supply that
Okay.
is happening. So the first one was just as needed and it's big and it's not very often,
Right.
right? The grain one is often, like, thank you.
The main times are when you have your harvest.
And I feel like this one's also often.
Well, in theory, if we're living the way we're supposed to, will we be at war with each other?
No.
Will we be at war with God? Sometimes
And we should be healthy.
sometimes this one is also called a sin offering. I don't like using that term because sin is a loaded term for us, right? Sin literally means separation from. That means in the Greek word for sin is hamartia. It means to miss the mark. It's an archery term. If you pull back your string, you knock an arrow and you aim at the bullseye and you hit anything but the bullseye, you've missed the mark. You may hit the target and may have done really well, but if you didn't hit the bullseye, then you've missed your shot. You get what I'm saying? And so this one's often called a sin offering, but just because you need healing in your body doesn't mean that you've sinned. That's why whenever Jesus is asked, there's the man who was born blind, and they say, Rabbi, who sinned, him or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus says, well, neither of them sinned. He was just born blind, but he was born blind that I might be here to heal him, and our Father in heaven would be exalted. No one sinned to cause him to be born blind, but God could bring good out of it by bringing healing. And so there's this notion, that's why they had this understanding that if you were sick, well, you must have sinned. You must have done something wrong. God's mad at you. You're not at peace with God. But it could just be that you got sick.
I'm not trying to jump ahead, but the next chapter 4 in mine's called the procedures for the sin offering.
That's why I said sometimes they refer to this as a sin offering. Now, the other one will be the general sin offering, but this one gets lumped in with the sin offering oftentimes in the New Testament. You get what I'm saying? They kind of put these two together. So this one, again, is an as needed. In theory, you're probably going to give 2 a year if things are going well, max. It's not, it should, let me put it this way. when we told the boys that they were not supposed to fight when they were preschoolers. Okay, you getting a picture already? Every day we'd have to tell them, you're not supposed to hit each other, right? You guys have all seen little boys when if they had to give a peace offering, they were doing it every single day. They're missing the point, right? This is not one that you should need to give very often. For the crops and the business, twice a year. But for healing or for relationships, hopefully that doesn't happen very often. Hopefully we're treating each other with respect. Hopefully we're following God's rules for how we live and what we eat, so we're not getting sick. Does that make sense? So what do you think would be the modern equivalent of this? Or do we know? Do we leave it blank for now? Maybe see if it fills in? Or what?
Sunday potluck.
Well, for that matter, fellowship time. Oh, we can come back to that, but yeah, that's the closest thing I can think of that we do that kind of fits this category. How do we come back together and make sure that we're at peace with each other?
That's interesting, because I'm gonna be really honest.
Okay.
I do most of our cooking, because my
Right,
schedules, I'm home,
right.
but like, this is honestly kind of, I dread when we have potlucks and have to bring things in. Because like Friday night and Saturday are my days off of cooking.
Okay,
And then I usually make a big meal Sunday night, but to me, that's like one more thing in my routine, I guess you can say. So for me, when we have things we have to bring in to church, for me, it's a dread, and I'm thinking, if I thought of it like that, then it would be a different connotation and a different perspective.
Could you imagine if we approached our life this way? That we are seeking to bring peace to those around us. I believe Jesus said the statement, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall inherit the kingdom of God." Maybe. Anything else you can think of?
This is one where a dove or a pigeon wasn't an option.
It wasn't, but if you were poor and it was two poor people who needed to make peace, they could bring a single animal together.
Is it because it's a sharing? A communal,
Yes.
and you can't really share?
You can't really share the pigeon or the dove. And if there absolutely is always an aspect of sharing with this.
And honestly, when we do our potlucks and bring in, I don't know that we've ever run out of food.
No, there's always stuff left over. That's why almost every time we do one, I tell people, even if you didn't bring anything, just go ahead and come on down, because we're gonna have plenty. There have been a couple of times where we might run out of a thing or two, but there's always still plenty of food left. Comments? Oh, geez. Any other thoughts so far? How are we doing on time?
About half hour?
Ooh, next one's kind of long. Do we want to try and jump into the next one? It goes into a couple of chapters.
Is it not one you can cut, like stop in the middle, or no?
Probably not. Because it goes from chapter 4:1 all the way to 5:13.
Wow. Somebody rambled in this one.
Well, this one is the one that is called the sin offering. This is what we probably think most often of as an offering. So, yeah. There's probably a lot more reasons to give this one. Oh, and then there's a sin offering, and then it's the guilt offering.
Oh, wow.
So realistically, these are the ones we want to give. These are the ones we want to stay away from.
And those are gonna take the longest to discuss about.
And they're gonna take the longest to discuss because we don't stay over here, we come over here, right? You know, in some ways, the early church participated in what was called the love feast. That every time they came together, it says they ate together in their homes. And I think in many ways it was trying to live into this notion. The potlucks is probably the closest thing we have. The fellowship time is kind of a little bit of that. It's a mini one of sorts. But it's, do we really give ourselves time to be at peace with our brothers and sisters? Do we give ourselves time to build relationships with? Because it's easy to not care about somebody that you don't know who they are. You know? And yet when you sit down at the table, you sit across from somebody and you eat with them, it's hard not to get to know them. In fact, it's really awkward when you're sitting at a table and you don't talk to each other. Right?
That's why I don't like sitting across from you.
Thank
You know, on the relationship under this, I have friends that went through a rough patch in their marriage, and their pastor, and I just found this totally weird, but now, you know, seeing that this is kind of a relationship offering, he brought their problem to the whole church. He pretty much in front of the congregation said that these two are having problems. We need to, you know, wrap our arms around them in some way. For them to allow him to do that kind of would have been like a,
It's not just, it wasn't a shame.
no,
It absolutely wasn't.
because at first I thought, man, he's kind of rubbing their nose in it, you know, in front of everybody.
But if a couple is actively feuding with each other, does that stay between them?
No.
No, it almost always splashes onto others, right? When a couple gets a divorce, is it ever clean? Is it ever tidy? Is it ever really civil? I mean, my best friend from high school married a woman that became Melissa's best friend, and they got divorced, and it's become messy. We've kept Adrian, but my best friend from high school, we hardly talk to. You almost have to pick one. And I don't know why we have to pick one, but it's like you have to.
We didn't even pick, they picked.
Yeah, in many ways, they picked. Andrew's like, you're good friends with Adrian, she's gonna need people, you guys stay in contact. And he just kind of walked off into the distance. The reality is when relationships are broken, it doesn't just affect those two. It affects everyone they're around, especially if they're both within the church. Am I wrong? And so there is an aspect where, yeah, this is meant to be public. And that's why Jesus is saying, blessed are the peacemakers, those who are willing to admit that things aren't right and let's fix it. Because it's not just going to help us out, it's going to help everybody we encounter. If all of my relationships are in good standing, then I'm not dealing with the anguish whenever I encounter a stranger that I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
But yet both of them have to be willing to do the,
It's supposed to be both. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't bring a peace offering and say, I want to be at peace. And the other person may not, but at least within yourself, you could bring a peace offering and say, I'm done with this feud. I want to be at peace with my brother, my sister. I want to be at peace with God about this. I am clearing my conscience of this, and I'm giving it up to God. I'm thinking of a scenario and I'm trying to decide whether or not I will say it. We still have some unpeace within our body, don't we? And the reality is we can't always help whenever the other person doesn't want to be at peace with us. But that doesn't mean that we can't say, for my part, God, forgive me and help me to be at peace with them. I think that's why Paul says, for as much as it is with you, be at peace with everyone. You can't control how they're going to react, but we should always be seeking to be at one. Does that make sense?
well, and that's all we can really do is we can, hope for peace with them and that even though they're not, for us to ask God to.
And for the record on this, especially probably in this relationship one, we may have to come back time and time again because the person we're seeking to be at peace with may not be receiving our peace. And they may still keep lashing out. And we may have to say, God, I'm beginning to get some resentment in my own heart that I need to deal with because I don't want to live this way. I can't make them change their attitude, but I've got to keep bringing myself at peace. That's probably the hardest part, and I think that's why it's always doable. The reality is, you can't just do this one once. It's probably going to need a follow-up. You fix one thing and you peel back the layer, and all of a sudden there's some raw spots still there. Does that make sense? Unfortunately, got a little sticky. Any final thoughts? Then let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the many blessings that you give us. And Lord, we seek to give thanks to you, to offer our tribute to you for all the things you do, both those things we notice and also the things we don't notice. Because Lord, you're constantly pouring out your love upon us. By the same token, Lord, out of that spirit of love and thanksgiving, we seek to be at peace. Peace with you, peace with each other, peace with this world that you've given us. And Lord, where things are out of balance, where there's sickness, where there's heartache, Lord, we ask that you'd help us to be peacemakers. Lord, that we would be a blessing to all those around us, our friends, our families, and even our enemies alike. And Lord, that we would be a blessing to the world around us. Lord, that we would be those caretakers that you've called us to be. And Lord, we pray that in our endeavors, in our businesses, Lord, that we would be peacemakers in that we would be good to our community and good to our customers and our clients. Lord, that we would honor you by all that we say and do. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, next week, our last one before we take a 2-week break, we're going to deal with that next big one. And We'll see how that goes. So thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your week.